We are taught that ambition is a virtue, that competition brings out the best in us. What they don't tell you is that in the petri dish of extreme talent and proximity, ambition can curdle into something far darker. It can become a silent, venomous envy that poisons not just your own soul, but the very reality of those around you. My name is Leo, and I was a resident at the prestigious Atelier du Soleil, a secluded artist's retreat in the French countryside. It was a dream. For 8 weeks, 6 of us, the most promising young painters of our generation, lived, worked, and were supposed to inspire each other. Instead, we became a feeding ground for a far older, more delicate predator. This is the legend of the Shadow Weaver, and the terrible truth that envy isn't an emotion. It's a thread, and someone knows how to pull it. The atmosphere was electric and toxic from week 2. We were all brilliant, but in different ways. There was Clara, whose use of light was divine. Marcus, a master of brutal, emotional, figurative work. Sophia, whose abstract pieces felt like dreams given form. And then there was Ilara. Ilara was different, not the most technically skilled, but her work had an unsettling magnetic pull. It didn't just depict darkness, it seemed to contain it. Her paintings were voids that the eye got lost in, and a quiet, seething resentment began to grow around her. Whispers started that she was a fraud, that her wealthy family had bought her spot, that her haunting style wasn't genius, but a calculated gimmick. I was part of the whispers. We all were, in our way. But the true architect of the venom was a critic in residence named Silas Thorne. A failed artist himself, he wielded his words like scalpels, praising one of us to the skies one day, only to eviscerate us the next. He thrived on our insecurity. He would take me aside and say, "Leo, your composition is strong, but you lack Clara's soul." He'd tell Clara, "Your light is beautiful, but it's shallow next to Marcus's raw pain." He was a puppeteer, and envy was his string. He saved his most barbed comments for Ilara. Derivative, he'd sneer. A cheap mimicry of true suffering. I saw the light in her eyes dim with each critique. The first sign was subtle. Clara, after a particularly harsh session with Thorne about her work lacking depth, found her prized painting. A sun-drenched meadow had inexplicably darkened overnight. The vibrant yellows had muted to a sickly ochre. The shadows had grown longer and more grasping, as if something were buried beneath the grass. She blamed faulty varnish. Then Marcus, who had just won a small internal prize, discovered his powerful portrait of a grieving man had been subtly altered. The tear on the subject's cheek now looked like a crack in the canvas, and the background, once a blur, now suggested shadowy figures pointing and laughing. He accused someone of sabotage. Tension became a living thing in the atelier. The air grew perpetually cool, even in the summer afternoons. And the shadows, they stopped behaving. They became too deep, too crisp. They would stretch towards you when you weren't looking, or hold a shape a second too long after the object casting it had moved. That's when I first saw her in the corner of the studio, always just at the edge of vision, the Shadow Weaver. She was a figure of profound, melancholic beauty, woven from the very substance of the atelier's deepening gloom. Her form was ethereal, a woman-shaped tapestry made of threads of pure, liquid shadow that swirled and pulsed like smoke. She sat, eternally, on a stool that wasn't there, her legs folded beneath her as if at a loom. Where her hands should have been, there were long, delicate needles of obsidian, clicking softly against each other. She was always working, her needles moving in a silent, hypnotic rhythm, weaving not fabric, but the very darkness of the room into intricate, terrible patterns. At first, only Ilara seemed to see her clearly. She'd stare into the corner, her face pale, whispering, "She's mending the tears? Can't you see? She's mending the tears in everything." We thought she was cracking under the pressure. The attacks escalated not on us, but on our work, the extensions of our souls. Sophia's vibrant abstract exploded into monochrome chaos overnight. My own painting, a seascape, saw its calm waters turn stormy and black, with grasping hands made of foam reaching for the shore. The envy in the room, stoked by Silas Thorne, had become a tangible force, and the Shadow Weaver was its artisan. She was reweaving our creations to reflect the rot in our hearts. The climax came on the night of the final review. Silas Thorne, drunk on his own manipulative power, delivered his final brutal critique of Ilara's work in front of everyone. "It's not art," he spat. "It's a stain, a void. You are a void, and you bring nothing but darkness here." The moment the words left his lips, the temperature plummeted. Every light in the atelier dimmed, the bulbs straining as the shadows thickened into velvet. The Shadow Weaver stood up from her non-existent stool. For the first time, we all saw her, not as a suggestion, but in horrifying clarity. Her shadow thread face turned towards Silas Thorne, and her beauty was gone, replaced by an ancient, hungry sorrow. She raised a needle hand, and she began to unweave. She didn't attack him. She attacked his legacy, his influence, the very connections he had poisoned. First, the successful career of a rival he destroyed years ago began to flicker back into possibility in our minds, as if his theft of that opportunity was being undone. Then, a marriage of a former student he'd broken apart with gossip seemed to reknit itself in the space of a heartbeat. Thorne screamed, clutching his head, as his greatest triumphs, all built on the ruin of others, were systematically unraveled by her silent needles. He was left not dead, but empty. A man whose entire life's narrative was being pulled apart thread by thread, leaving him a husk filled with the hollow echoes of stolen successes. But she wasn't finished. Her gaze fell upon the rest of us, the envious chorus. Her needles moved again, but this time she began to weave connections. She wove the shadow of Clara's darkened meadow into Marcus's cracked portrait. She threaded the storm from my seascape into Sophia's chaotic monochrome. She was stitching our failures, our poisoned works, together into a single ghastly tapestry of shared malice. And we could feel it. We could feel our creativity, our inspiration, being knotted together with everyone else's resentment, creating a psychic feedback loop of despair. Ilara, who had been silent throughout, finally stepped forward. She was crying, but not from fear, from pity. "She doesn't want to hurt us," Ilara whispered, her voice cutting through the psychic dread. "She's the consequence. You wove a tapestry of envy, and she is just the pattern it made." Ilara walked towards the Shadow Weaver. The creature paused, her needles still. Ilara, who had been the target of all the venom, held out a hand, not in threat, but in offering. On her palm was the small, private sketch she'd made of the atelier's garden, a place of simple, quiet beauty she loved. It was the one piece untouched by ambition or spite. The Shadow Weaver looked at the sketch. The swirling darkness of her form softened. She reached out a needle tip, then gently, ever so gently, touched the corner of the paper. Then she began to fade, pulling the heavy, envious shadows she had woven out of our world and back into whatever corner of reality she calls home. The lights brightened, the oppressive weight lifted. The aftermath is complicated. Silas Thorne is in a psychiatric ward, babbling about strings and torn tapestries. Our paintings are permanently altered, bearing the scars of that night. But they are also honest. They now show what was truly festering beneath. I am no longer an artist. I work in a library now, surrounded by quiet stories that are not my own. The Shadow Weaver is real. She is the embodiment of connections poisoned by envy. She doesn't punish with violence, but with revelation. She takes the hidden tapestry of your malice and makes it the only thing you and your victims can see. So be careful what you covet. Be careful the threads of resentment you spin. Because in the quiet corners of the world, a weaver sits. And she is always, always working. If your life feels like it's fraying at the edges, Look at the patterns you've helped create. Share this story. Let it be a warning. Envy is not a free emotion. It's a material. And someone is always keeping the ledger.